So I think, although a monetary union would require a better coordination of economic policies, I think that would really be a road to political and economic disaster also, because we don't want that. And I don't think the political leaders today would accept that. I don't think that Germany, for example, at present, would accept a close coordination of Europe's economic policies. So I don't think this is the road forward to coordinate economic policies to a large extent. Okay. Well, I think this is very easy to answer. Has the Greek crisis demonstrated that the European monetary member states and the European authorities are good at coping with crisis? No, I mean, we've followed this Greek tragedy for months now, and it's just enough to read the newspapers to realize that what we have seen is really a weakness of the European authorities to cope with the crisis, and a lot of arm twisting between Germany and the other countries, and a lot of political tensions that are growing and growing. I mean, to me, it's absolutely appalling today to read about what the Greek newspapers say about Germans and Germany, and vice versa, what the German newspapers say, and even politicians say about Greek. I mean, it's a tragedy for Europe that we're starting to sort of mob each other. That's an effect, this political tension also of the monetary union. But they're not good at handling crisis, no. I think I don't need to say more than that. They have proved to be very inefficient. Takes a long time, and the decisions are not very smart, and they've changed and so on. Okay, I think I'm coming to the last question now. Which of the countries in the Eurozone is the biggest threat to restoration of stability? Well, many people would probably argue Greece. I mean, Greece has been a fantastic scapegoat, hasn't it? I mean, if you follow the media, perfect scapegoat. I mean, you know, the Greeks, they sometimes retire at 53, and they drink wine, and they don't work so much, and they have cheated also with their public finances and so on. I mean, it's the ideal scapegoat. I mean, look at Swedish newspapers. Almost all of them have only blamed the problems on Greece and not on the European Monetary Union, which is absolutely absurd, but that's the case in Sweden. But is it really Greece that is the biggest problem? I won't give you a lot of data, a lot of figures, although I'm an economist, but let me give you a few data that show the balance, the macroeconomic balance of the European Monetary Union in a sort of global situation. The European Monetary Union, the 16 member states, have altogether a deficit on their current account, basically exports minus imports, of around 70 billion US dollars. That's not very much for a big, huge economic empire like the European Union. No, 70 billion, that's not very much. But if we look at the figures a little more detailed, we will see that why is the deficit so small? Because the surplus in Germany is so big. Germany alone has a surplus on its current account of 170 or 175 billion US dollars. The two other surplus countries, Holland, the Netherlands, which has a surplus of about 45 billion US dollars, and Austria, which has about $10 billion in surplus last year. Luxembourg, forget about Luxembourg. But if we look at the other 13 countries, that is the European Monetary Union minus Germany, Holland, and Austria, it turns out that this deficit from these 13 countries is almost 300 billion US dollars. And then we're talking about a lot of money. So what the average data shows really that the European Monetary Union, in terms of its trade balance, is rather balanced. I mean, we're doing pretty well. They are doing pretty well. But behind this rather nice picture are the huge differences between Germany on the one hand and most of the other countries on the other side. What does that mean? It means that the big problem is that erosion, the lack of international competitiveness of 13 of 16 member countries in the Eurozone. The biggest problem is not Greece, it's Germany. Germany has insisted, I'm not blaming their political leaders, I mean, they have pursued a rather, responsible macroeconomic policy. They have tried to restore their international competitiveness with great success. They have pushed down wages, which I don't like, but anyhow, they have, against much opposition from the trade unions, they have reduced real wages. They have, during 10 years, improved their international competitiveness and created a huge surplus in their foreign trade balance. that means that it's the other countries that have suffered from Germany's success. You cannot save the Eurozone without doing something about Germany's surplus. I won't go into much detail now, but just end by saying that even if the euro is weakened now, which I hope it will be and it should be by the financial markets, it's weakened versus other currencies in the world, currencies like the US dollars, it doesn't help very much for Greece, Portugal, Italy and Spain. It mainly benefits Germany. Around 75% of some of those problem countries, around 75% of their trade is with other members of the Eurozone, which means that they don't gain international competitiveness if the euro is weakened, because they mainly trade with other member states. The main beneficiary is Germany, whose exports is much more diversified and sophisticated than, say, the exports of Portugal. So I see no solution really to the problem unless Germany leaves the European Monetary Union, which means there would be nothing left. Really. Now, I'm not criticizing Germany. I'm just pointing out to something that I think most commentators forget, that the big problem in the European Monetary Union is the fantastic international competitiveness of Germany, which means that the competitiveness of other countries has been eroded gradually during 10 years, and now they're stuck with a common currency. There's no way to get out of this without leaving the Eurozone. So I will not guess about the future. A couple of years ago, before this big financial crisis broke out, I suggested, half-jokingly, that Italy would leave the Eurozone in April 2013. I didn't say exactly which date, but I was joking a bit because I thought the tensions will grow and grow and grow. Now it may not be Italy that leaves first. It may be Greece that is forced out. But my guess is, if this crisis is being aggravated further, I think that Germany might say, I'm fed up with bailing up those other member states. We will leave, and we can do that. We have a strong economy, and that would be the end of a project that was, as I said before, built on political prestige rather than sound economic analysis.
Well, anybody who wants to put some questions to these two speakers? Come on. I think you were first. Tell us your name and... Yes?
My name is Anders Norman. I would like to ask some questions because what I hear here, I doesn't hear in the Swedish media. I doesn't hear it from the Swedish politicians. Why? I mean, if I understand from Stefan, two important points for me. First, you had a kind of an agreement to follow some financial rules. And if I understand right, no one of these 16 Euro countries has followed them. But why has no one told this before? My first question. Not in the media, not by the politicians. And the second thing is that Germany is now the big, how should I say, finance motor in the Euro countries, as I understand. And 13 out of the 16 are losing out. So it becomes an enormous friction between these Euro countries. As you said before the Euro, I was here at that time also, you predicted this very well at that time. And you said that we have stupid politicians. Maybe we have stupid mass media. You said in 1992 we had the Swedish people, politicians and even the central bank trying to defend our Swedish krona in a stupid way. But why doesn't the mass media, why doesn't the politicians in Europe see this? I heard Carl Bildt yesterday saying 25 times we need solidarity. I've never heard him say solidarity before. But he said it in Swedish television 25 times. We need solidarity with Greece.
Well, that's a good question, and yes, a good question. 16 countries have not followed the Stability Pact at the moment. And the question, one of the questions were, why does not the European Union follow its own legislation?
Well, first of all, because it did try to follow that Stability Pact when Portugal was the only culprit. But then when the big guys, France and Germany, also broke the rules, then of course there was no political pressure because they were the big guys. Well, there were many good questions. Anders, let me begin with solidarity. I understand that in the last few months, this those who advocate the Swedish membership of the European Monetary Union, they're not talking about economic benefits anymore for Sweden, because that's a very egoistic argument, they say. Now it's a matter of solidarity with the countries that have problems. And I think it's important to also realize that for the countries that have problems today, like Greece and others, it would be even worse if Sweden joined the European Monetary Union. Why is that? Because that would be another surplus country that would, all other things being equal, push up the rate of exchange, the value of the euro, which is not what Europe needs, especially not the problem country. So it really, if they get another big surplus country into the union, it's even worse for the countries that are suffering from a lack of international competitiveness. So I think it's just stupid to talk about solidarity. The best thing that we can do is to stay out of the union. Now, why don't Swedish politicians and mass media talk about those? Well, I indicated earlier that they have found an excellent culprit, the scapegoat in Greece, because of the corruption and cheating and so on. And it's ridiculous, because we all know that the problems are not because of one country has mismanaged its economy, which it has in Greece, but so many countries are suffering from problems that are intimately related to the fact that they're members of a very ill-functioning monetary union. And they don't want to talk about that. And I think you mentioned, Jan-Erik, that in the Swedish discussion now about elections, there's not a word about the European Monetary Union, the European Union. And it reminds me of one, do you remember the scene in Fawlty Towers when the German visitors came and don't mention the war, don't mention the war. And now it's like the same thing in Sweden, don't mention the European Union, don't mention the European Monetary Union, don't mention the euro. We should keep quiet about that, because all big political parties are in favor. Well, why didn't someone say it before? I wouldn't say they're stupid politicians in a way, but there's so much prestige, political prestige invested in this project. It's very difficult for politicians now. Remember last year, 2 years ago, when they celebrated the 10th anniversary of the creation of the European Monetary Union? They were applauding, all of them, say this is a fantastic project, look how well it has worked and so on. Not a word of criticism, not a word about problems that so many others saw. So I think it's really a problem related to the political prestige. And you mentioned Sweden in 1992. I remember that some of us were very critical about this idea of keeping a fixed rate of exchange when we had an inflation rate so much higher than in our trading partners. And we were treated like it was a matter of national treason, I would say, that those who said, oh, come on, this is not sustainable, they were almost outlaws, sort of out in the wilderness, because it was against our national interest to question our policies. And afterwards, of course, 99% of the Swedish people say it was excellent that we skipped this stupid idea of a fixed rate of exchange. But now they're coming back saying that we should try another time to have a fixed rate of exchange, which I don't understand the logic. I can only understand it in terms of political prestige.
I don't think there's any logic in that. But there were some questions on Sweden, you can forget that. Yeah. But the other questions of why didn't they follow the Stability Pact, for example? What do you say?
I have to say that the answer was great. I can't add anything into the answer. It was a great answer. It was truly, if you look at the agenda, and I mentioned of course Germany again, they are truly the only country that benefits from the euro, and because they have made the agenda 2010. So I think the only way for the European Union to survive and even to survive is to make new rules, and they then start to act after them, because the old rules did not fit into reality. They were put down in 1992, right? 1991? Not Maastricht, 1995. Yeah, so 91. Yeah, okay, yeah. So I think we are living in 2010 now. So I think if they want to stabilize the euro, they have to make new rules.
Could I just add that I think Germans understand perfectly well that although they've been doing fine with the euro, they would be doing fine without the euro as well. So now they will pay the price for so many other countries' mistakes, or for the construction that they were. So I think really they know that they could do it without the euro, which is not the case for some of the weaker countries. Okay. They suffer, but they would also suffer if they were forced to leave with the huge debts in euro, denominated in euro. I think they have to leave sooner or later, the problem countries, but they all know that there are very high costs also related to leaving the union.
Okay, some more questions and more rapid answers.
Yes.
Max.
Stefan, what would be the most practical and least painful way of breaking up the euro? Because I understand it's not an easy thing to do.
It's forbidden to begin with. I mean, there is no exit clause. All members have to be members of the European Monetary Union, and that is also true for Sweden. We are sort of legally obliged to adopt the euro. We don't do that, and no one will force us to do that. But there's no way to leave the union, and no one can really tell what would happen. The cost would be practically and politically and economically, they would be very high, but I think sooner or later they will have to do to break up. Some countries will have to leave, and I think that today the best solution would them to, for the really difficult countries now, like Greece and Portugal and Spain, would be a default, some kind of default procedure. They will not be able to pay back all the loans to the banks that they've got. So I think a decent default procedure would be necessary to bring these countries back into business, so to say. But it's difficult. No one knows.
Some end on this part. So I take one more question. That's you.
Yes, thank you. I'm Antti Pesonen from Finland.
I think, can you stand up? I think it's
yes,
better.
thank you. About the press and the open discussion, I must say that I'm afraid that there is more open discussion in Sweden than in Finland about EU and Euro matters. I think that we can all see that the whole EU project is ruled by economical and political elite, and the big media is one important part of that coalition. And in Finland we would not have euro if we would have open discussion and referendum about euro. And I must say that this crisis now, euro and Greek crisis, is the first time in Finland that there is some signs in big media about questions that we could have another way, another alternatives to EU membership and euro. There has been no such real questions from the journalists before. I would like to ask from you about
You have a question, please?
Yes, I try to say it short. There is, of course, crisis in Eurozone and in Greek and in Spain and so on. How do you see this crisis in part of whole so-called Western economic system crisis? Because there is more loans, more debts than money in the world, this economic system. How do you see the future? Will this economic system, could it collapse totally, more totally than we have shown?
Well, very brief answer. No, I don't think it will collapse. But I think the coming, say, 10 years will be very difficult. And what we have witnessed now and what has been accentuated with the crisis is the change in economic power in the world, the movement of economic power towards the east and to the south. I mean, over the past 10 years, countries that we sometimes call developing countries, I don't like the expression, have accounted for about 2/3 of all economic growth in the world. In the coming 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if they account for 80% of all economic growth in the world. So what we see is a dramatic, but gradual, but dramatic change in the global economic power in the world. And I think that our problems in the rich countries are very, very difficult to deal with over the coming years. So I think we'll see a stagnation, not a collapse, but a stagnation of many of our economies. And I see very few possibilities to come out of this crisis with very vigorous economies. It'll take many years. And so I think that's one dramatic consequence of the crisis.
Well, thank you. I saw one.
And I would, the question
Yes,
that I would
please.
like to Stefan. I ask, do you think that we should see now in Europe the European political leaders trying to put up a battle against the financial powers in Europe?
Well, a very short answer, I don't think so.
Thank you.